So, so, well, someone said I should react to this, and it was trendy, but I never knew, surprisingly, you know. But, yeah, I watched some clips on TikTok on my brother's phone, and this nigga is scary. They even have a Netflix series on him, like Jeffrey Dahmer, psychology of a serial killer. Damn. Let's go. Let's go. For about 15 years old, on a great deal of my thoughts were basically unshareable, so I closed myself off. I just put on the mouth of.
Those words were spoken by Jeffrey Dahmer, a serial killer, a sex offender, necrophiliac, and cannibal who brutally murdered 17 Milwaukee young men throughout the late 70s, 80s, and 90s. Dahmer's story makes for a chilling example of a psychopath.
He looks so calm, like he just looks so innocent, like just. Like, why?
Whose appearance of normalcy played a huge part in his ability to get away with so many atrocities. Yet it is also this facade that causes
interviewing you, you have killed, and you're crossing your. Who do you think you are? You're crossing your leg! Huh?
Causes us to wonder how much a person who seems perfectly normal on the outside could commit such outrageous acts of violence. We want to look into the eyes of these individuals to get a glimpse of why they are the way they are. We want to understand the psychology of a serial killer. As a society, we like to think we have psychopaths and serial killers figured out, and in some ways we have. In 1980, a Canadian forensic psychologist named Robert Hare created a master list of 22 traits you can use to diagnose psychopathy, a list that is still the most widely used by experts to this day. The list includes things like superficial charm, grandiosity, pathological lying,
Super what? I'm not dumb. So why are you guys speaking big English for me now? Super what?
to diagnose psychopathy, a list that is still the most widely used by experts to this day. The list includes things like superficial charm.
Hey Siri! Siri, where are you? What's superficial charm, Siri? Oh. My phone. I'm actually using my phone to record. And it's not an iPhone, you know.
Grandiosity.
Grandiosity. I've not heard that before, you know. But I'm sure I don't know what it means. But I always ask Google.
Pathological.
Oh, pathological lying. Yeah. I've not also heard that before. Yeah. I'll find out, but I think that these are for crazy people because I don't know the meaning. But if I know the meaning, please, I take my words back.
Lying and deception.
I know deception now.
Impulsivity.
Impulse. Okay, I think impulse is, I don't know actually, but I'll also find out.
Proneness to boredom. Showing.
Why is it bored? Jeffrey, don't you have friends? Why would you do?
No remorse, a lack of realistic long-term plans, leading a parasitic lifestyle, and being unable to accept responsibility. When most of us think of the term psychopath, these traits pretty much perfectly describe the image that comes to mind. A person who is full of themselves, unaware of the emotional reality of others, deceitful, manipulative, and self-centered.
Wow!
Where things get a little complicated.
That means I know two psychopaths. Yeah, I know two psychopaths. Yeah. I can't call their names out here, but
Is when you discover that there's still a distinct difference between being a psychopath and a serial killer.
Yeah, it's just, I'm not. But, you know, like, you get, yeah, that's it, yeah.
Although the two distinctions often overlap. Unlike what a lot of us think, the fact that someone is a diagnosed psychopath doesn't automatically mean they have the capacity to kill, and vice versa. Just because someone is a serial killer doesn't automatically make them a psychopath. Dahmer is a perfect example of a person who is a serial killer, but not necessarily a clear-cut psychopath.
So why is he killing?
A revised 40-point version of the Hare psychopathy checklist is used to evaluate individuals. Those that meet 25 to 35 of the criteria on the list are considered to be psychopathic, while other notorious psychopaths like Richard Ramirez, Ted Bundy, and John Wayne Gacy all scored within.
So they have plenty past this one. Wow. This is serious.
In the 25 to 35 range, Dahmer only matched 13 of the warning signs, and you can pick up on this just by watching some of the interviews he gave after he was caught.
And I acted on my fantasies, and that's where everything went wrong.
Why would you have a fool? A big fool, F-O-O-L. Why will you act on your fantasies?
In them, Dahmer comes across as startlingly soft-spoken, self-reflective, modest, remorseful, and honest about what he did and why he thinks he may have done it. Other serial killers struggle to convey this level of apparent normalcy after their crimes were exposed. For years, Ted Bundy tried to lie and manipulate his way out of responsibility for his crimes. John Wayne Gacy admitted to his acts with absolutely no remorse, referring to his victims as pieces of his property. Richard Ramirez proclaimed proudly,
Wow.
"I love to kill people. I love watching them die."
Oh my God. Oh Allah, please. Save, help these people. Help them mentally and physically, and I pray they change. Because people do change. I believe they should change. Oh God, please.
Both displayed signs of obvious narcissism and psychopathy, traits that could pretty easily single them out in a crowd and make them appear obviously different from you or I. This is what makes Dahmer different and perhaps even more terrifying than other serial killers. At the time that he was committing the murders, Dahmer was able to fly under the radar more easily than others since he didn't fit the image of the deranged, egotistical maniac that everyone was looking for. He spoke and looked just like you and I. He could have been your classmate, your close friend, your cousin, or even your brother. And you would have never known.
Wow.
Jeffrey's own father, Lionel Dahmer.
Well, sometimes we just have to be secure, we just have to YouTube, this is fake, but we just have to stay protected.
Wrote an entire memoir about how
see something acting weird, hey, leave me alone. No. Stop. This should be in your house. In case you want to cut chicken, cut onions, yeah. It's fake though. YouTube is fake. It's fake.
how shocking it was for him to wrestle the fact that his oldest son, who he remembers as being a sweet, playful, curious child, went on to inflict such horror on so many people. Whenever people hear of a story like Jeffrey Dahmer's, the knee-jerk reaction is to focus on the perpetrator's childhood, assuming that they must have been abused, neglected, or psychologically damaged in some way. This approach is understandable. People want events to follow a linear point A to point B cause and effect pattern. It makes evil easier to predict, identify, and prevent. Unfortunately, the motivations, desires, and urges of serial killers don't usually operate that way, making these questions about the person's childhood usually pretty unhelpful in explaining their behavior. While Dahmer didn't have a picture-perfect upbringing, by no accounts was he physically abused or taken advantage of in any way that even came close to the horrors that he went on to inflict on his victims. During his sentencing, Dahmer went up on the stand and said this to the judge: "This has never been a case about trying to get free. I never wanted freedom. Frankly, I wanted death for myself. This was a case to tell the world that I did what I did not for reasons of hate. I hated no one. I knew I was sick or evil or both. Now I believe I was sick. I know how much harm I've caused. I tried to do the best I could to make amends after the arrest, but no matter what I did, I cannot undo the terrible harm I've caused." This quote encapsulates the questions we're all asking. What is this sickness that drives serial killers to do what they do? And how could someone who appears to be so stable commit such insidious violations of humanity? Experts have come to learn that the desire to inflict extreme harm on others is more often a mysterious dark urge that originates from deep within the individual, and not something external like we tend to think. Dahmer described this urge as a compulsion, which he says started to stir in him around the age of 9. or 10, when he became fascinated by the bodies of a lifeless crab he found on the beach. Over the next few years, Dahmer's compulsion grew, and he began to dissect other small animals, including dogs and cats, saying that he was captivated with the way that the insides of their bodies looked. In his early teens, these desires switched from animals to humans. Dahmer didn't hear voices in his head that told him what to do. He was not a person who was acting on impulse or for revenge. He went out on secret, premeditated missions, honing in on strangers with the singular intent of committing vicious atrocities on them. After his first murder in 1978, Dahmer claims that he tried to get his urges in check, and he did to an extent, going 6 years without blood on his hands. But he, as well as all others like him, could only keep the uncontrollable urge at bay for so long. One framework that psychologists use to categorize personality traits is called the 5-factor model. It divides the human personality into 5 main pillars: extroversion, agreeableness, conscientiousness, neuroticism, and...
Come on, man. Why all this big English? Can't you use words like evil, bad, not smart, snob, is not open-minded to people? What's all this now?
openness to experience. The combination of these traits that is most commonly used to describe a psychopath is a person who is low in
Don't do that to me. Do not do that to me.
agreeableness and conscientiousness, and high in neuroticism. This type of person has a low level of sensitivity towards the emotion of others, a low level of intelligence and ability to adhere to the rules, standards, and structures set by society, and a high potential to experience emotional instability or possess some kind of mood disturbance. It's been theorized that the most noteworthy trait difference between functioning psychopaths who are able to become relatively successful based on our society's normative standards of achievement and unsuccessful psychopaths who are unable to amount to much of any quantifiable success is conscientiousness. Possessing high levels of conscientiousness makes a person dutiful, organized, deliberate, and competent.
Do you know the funny part? Like, I understand what they are saying, though, but exactly, yeah. You're correct.
For example, let's say there's a diagnosed psychopath named Jimmy. Jimmy has low levels of empathy towards others,
Okay.
a tendency towards lying and deception,
Okay.
and a grandiose sense of self. In almost all professional settings, these psychopathic characteristics would make Jimmy an unlikable and untrustworthy person in the eyes of his coworkers and employers.
Bro, I'm done. And if you enjoyed the video, if the video was funny, like and subscribe. I'm just doing this for all to make you laugh. Just for fun, comedy. You get, so like, subscribe. Thank you for watching. Watch more of my videos. YouTube, please do not. The knife was fake.